Hi, this is Chaplain Tyler, and you're watching this video and you got this with Tyler. One of the things that I have seen and experienced in several situations are leaders, and in this context I'm talking about Christian leaders who appear and want to appear as good and progressive and selfless and loving, and yet they are not. At their core, they are very manipulative, and it's really all about them. These are Christian narcissists who have been put into leaders or obtained positions of leadership, and they can be some of the most damaging people that I have ever seen. Now, I'm not saying that all Christian leaders are narcissists. Of course not. There are some amazing Christian leaders that I've known, and there are probably a lot more really good, strong Christian leaders out there than there are bad. And neither do I want to say that this is limited to Christian leaders. But this is the context that I'm familiar with. And so if you can apply this to whatever setting you're in, whether it's work, whether it is in a community of faith that you're in, whether maybe it's even in your own family, these are some of the traits that I've learned that really show what's happening at the core. Show who the person really is. Some of these thoughts may be a bit disjointed. I've made some notes, but hope you'll bear with me. So I'm not going to rehash or go over all the different traits that make a narcissist. That is being covered in so many really wonderful ways by lots and lots of people on a variety of channels. And a variety of sources. So if you're new to narcissism and what that means and what that looks like, please find some good resources to look at and become familiar with that concept. The first trait that I find with Christian narcissist leaders is that if you don't agree with them 100% in every situation, then you are, quote, against them, that you don't really support them. And it's based on a huge insecurity where if they're questioned at all in terms of their thought process or authority, then you're done. They just cut you off and write you off. I know one Christian leader who had a very good second in command. The second in command took seriously their role to try to help and move the organization forward and support the particular Christian, the CEO. And eventually the CEO let her go, and she couldn't understand why. And all he said was, "You didn't support me." And everybody in the organization knew that she did in every way possible, but she also had opinions about what was right and wrong. And so she would, as is her responsibility and what is right in her role, she did ask questions. But even by asking questions, just questions, it became a challenge to his authority, and he could not see that for the benefit that it was, and took it as she was against him. It is extremely difficult to try to talk with a Christian narcissist leader. They don't take criticism, as you can see, and they really don't want to receive feedback. Here's the second trait, they tend to use people as objects, and they use relationships, and they avoid relationships if possible, but when they do have relationships with people, they treat people as ministry objects, meaning that they use the relationships to get an outcome that they want. So I know one guy who came to a particular church. He was a leader of a university Christian organization, and he wanted certain things from the church in terms of financial remuneration. The church did not feel quite right in doing that, and so he built relationships for the purpose of gaining funds, not for the purpose of helping or being there for people. And that's the difference. It's all about a specific outcome that he wants. That's what I mean by treating people as objects. And that is opposite of what it is that Jesus wants us to do. Another trait that I have seen in Christian narcissist leaders is the tendency to have grandiose thoughts that a lot of narcissists in general have. I know one CEO who told me directly that he can do every single job of his organization better than anybody else can. Now, I'm talking a healthcare organization where he had about 750, 800 employees, and he was saying that he could do the job better of every single person there than they could. Really? That is such an unbelievably arrogant statement to make. And at that moment, I lost any respect I had for him. And I thought to myself, well, prove it. Try. So you're saying you're better than any of the nurses here, any of your directors of care. You can do their job better. You can do the job of your accountant, of your director of finance. You can do your HR better than anybody. You can do the job that I had better than me. You can do everything better than anyone else. That's ridiculous. So grandiose thoughts. Now, one area that this comes out in charismatic churches is when you have an itinerant prophet who comes, and that prophet believes that they can hear God better than anybody else in that community. And they come in, I've seen this, they come in and they say a number of things to the community, and they don't have an idea of what's really happening in the community with the people. They haven't built relationship. They haven't really seen what God is doing in that community over time. And the damage that they do to people saying things that they are not going to be held accountable for. And I'll get back to that point in a second, because they can just leave. But when they come in with an air of superiority and say, I know better than you, I hear God better than you, that's a big warning sign. That's not a heart that is based in humility. That's a heart that is prideful. And I've seen a lot of damage done on that one. Perhaps the biggest one I've seen, the biggest trait to watch out for, is that these Christian narcissist leaders are masters at avoiding accountability. It's always somebody else's fault. They always find a way to make it somebody else's fault. Now, they can do what some of these prophets do, and they can come into an organization for a length of time, maybe anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, and they'll get the organization mobilized, get everybody working on their side, take the organization down roads they should not be going down because it's not right. And then before the consequences of their actions can be seen or taken, they leave. And I've seen this a number of times. I know one particular individual who came into an organization, wanted the organization to succeed. That was what he said. What he did is that he made so many unreal and how do I say this? He got people going on a direction that was not good for the direction and not even possible, all in the name of God, and hyped them all up to go in a direction, and they followed because he was the leader that particular board had put in place. And he got the organization into a very difficult position where several of the leaders that had helped get that organization to that place, he systematically got rid of because he saw them as a threat. And so he undermined the human capital and intellectual capital of the organization, and put resources, money and capital, to causes that were not doable and not realistic. And he wouldn't listen to anybody that they weren't realistic. He really didn't know. And so by the end of his 2 years, he had he had alienated the organization's support base. He had gotten rid of so many of the people that had brought that organization to solid functioning. He had committed the organization to a course that was not doable, and they had worked their way into debt, and it was horrible, and he didn't get any consequences because he decided to leave. Now, did he leave because he saw the writing on the wall? I don't know. But I do know that nobody could tell him anything, and he really had no clue of the damage he was doing to the people. Another example that I know is that there was a CEO of a Christian organization that I was with who, through his own unethical bookkeeping that he did with a director of finance, when that loophole was finally discovered several years later through a very meticulous audit, what he did in order to avoid consequence is that instead of him being held accountable, he fired all the management staff. Anybody that would have helped him get out of it, he just fired to save his own skin. It was ridiculous. But it's all about them. It's all about them saving face and not having to take the consequences of their actions and face them. That same CEO had built in to that organization a structure that prohibited anyone in the organization from going to the board about him. 100% complete avoidance of accountability. And it was all in the name of protecting the position. Well, what it did is it allowed him to be a tyrant. And he frequently screamed at people. And there was and treated them poorly and abused staff members. And nobody could say anything because you weren't allowed to go to the board about it. Very sick. And this is in a Christian organization. I was appalled. Let me have a quick look here. Bottom line is that Christian narcissist leaders, they are in the business of building their empire. They're not in the business of building God's kingdom. And there's a big difference, huge difference. One is about submission to God and doing what He wants done and making sure that we are doing things in a way that is appropriate and in God's character with love and respect and honor and relationships with people. When we don't do that, we fall into building our own kingdoms and our own empires. And empires are about conquest. Empires are about our own legacy. Empires are about our image and having people bow to our image. There's a lot of control that happens with somebody who is in building their own empire, even in the name of God. You can have a pastor who builds the church and finds success in the church in the name of God, and they're not building what God wants them to build. He or she is building their own empire. I know one particular pastor who came to a church, built the church a bit, had a prominent church in the community in a particular city, was seen as very influential in the community and in government, had a very public persona, but behind the scenes, we found out that he was ultra controlling to the point that he had hidden cameras all around the church and would sit for hours watching, going over those cameras to make sure that his staff weren't doing or the people weren't doing anything that was, quote, out of line with God, and would hold things against people based on what he saw and heard. Didn't matter what the context was. Didn't matter what it meant. It was all about control. And again, as a Christian leader, you can't do that. It is not A, ethical, and B, it is not in the character of God. That is fear-based. He spun it as, we don't want to defraud the kingdom. We don't want to do anything that would be seen to be wrong. We don't want to tarnish the ministry. It's not the motivation. The motivation was control. It was absolutely horrible. So I've seen and experienced a lot of this. I've watched this now play out again and again and again in different settings, whether it's in churches, whether it's in Christian organizations, whether it is even in families, unfortunately. And my heart breaks when I see it, because I know the damage being done. And it doesn't matter what the person says that their motivation is. In this case, the ends do not justify the means. They just don't. How you do something and the motivation for why you do it matters. And as a Christian leader, if you are operating in such a way that you can rationalize your behavior and lead people in such a way that you are not demonstrating the character of God based on the fruit of the Spirit, you are absolutely not doing what God would have you do, period. And the damage that happens to the people is extreme. I don't want you to get caught in situations. I don't want you, if you're going to a particular church or you're working for a particular organization, I want you to be careful and watch your leadership, not undermine them, not purposely through our own fear and insecurity point out all their flaws, but be wise. Look at your leaders. Look at what they're doing. Are they truly operating out of the right motives? Do they reflect the nature and character of God? If they do, great. If you see some of these warning signs of avoiding accountability, not able to hear or take any kind of criticism, where even a question is seen that you don't support them, grandiose thoughts where they think that they hear God better than anybody else, or that they can do everybody else's job better than they can. Things like that are extremely damaging, and you have to watch. So my prayer for you is that you are protected, that you are safe, that you have good discernment, that God helps you to see what's happening around you, not to sow seeds of rebellion, but to and discord, not to gossip, but to be wise, so that you can appropriately protect your heart and pray for your leaders. Now, they may not change their character, because narcissists are notoriously bad at change. Self-growth and self-awareness is extremely low for them. But pray that God's light shines in their life and in the life of your community. Pray that any spirit that is hiding their actions, so that the people's eyes can be seen, or their people's eyes can see what's really happening. Their actions can be seen. And last, you have to decide whether it's worth you staying. If God wants you to stay wherever you are, under that particular leader, then stay. The point at which to go is if staying there would cost you your true spiritual and emotional and physical health. I found that I had to come to a point where if I stayed, I would be damaged, excessively damaged. And that's the point at which I had to leave. There were many times where I stayed because I knew it was the right thing. I knew God wanted me to stay. I was there to do a job. I was there to help and to support people. And that's what I wanted to do. So be careful, be wise, and watch around you in whatever organization you're in or whatever community of faith you're in. And if you're not in a Christian one, that's fine. Take the principles that I've outlined and look at them and be wise and careful. And in the meantime, bloom where you're planted. You're there for a reason. You're there to do good. Do that good. And remember that I see you, I believe in you, and you got this. This is Chaplain Tyler signing off. Have a wonderful, blessed day.